Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Francis Gibson, and I was in the state legislature for about 13 years. I'm recovering from that stint, and I've been asked to just kind of moderate and MC our meeting this morning. This is our 13th year of doing this. I sit up there many years, but I'd like to just special thanks to Revere Health and Scott Barlow. They provide the breakfast. We do this meeting twice a year, times 13, so this is 26 great breakfasts that you provide. So. Also, just maybe a shout out to Rick Nielsen, Superintendent. Just raise your hand there and hosting us at this facility. It's been here every year, and it's just an opportunity for us to get a better understanding what's going on at the Capitol, maybe ask questions or things like that. And so we'll go through the format, but before we start, I've asked that Stephanie Ashcroft, if you'd be willing to just kind of give us a prayer, and then Monica Bambro, if you'll lead us in the pledge after that. So you're welcome to come up here, Stephanie.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to be here gathered together as citizens of this great county and this great state and nation. We're grateful for the opportunity to learn about what is going on this legislative session. We're grateful for those who serve and who diligently do the work, and we ask that we might be inspired to ask great questions and to be able to better understand what is happening this year. And we're grateful for this food, and we ask that thou would please bless it. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We live in a great country, but I think about that's a macro level, but a micro level where we live in our county. I moved here from Texas almost 26 years ago. And my wife is from Utah. I've learned really quickly that wherever the wife wants to live is where you're going to live. And we came back here 26 years ago after some education and living elsewhere. So today you have some white pieces of paper, and there should be some pens or pencils on your desk. Feel free to ask questions, write your questions out. If you have a specific legislator you would like to address that to, just write his name at the top and then write your question. When you have your questions, just raise your hand. I have a couple of runners that'll go pick them up. They'll bring them to me, and I'll just try to sort them based on who asked the question. If it's repetitive, I may just answer it once and move on. We try to get as much content and as many different questions from you as we can during this about an hour and a half. And it's really a civil meeting. We're hoping that you will remember that, as well as our representatives. We have great people representing us, and I think of everyone that I get to work with. I'm the president and CEO of the Utah Hospital Association, so every hospital in the state of Utah I get to work with, and so I spend a lot of time, even now, in my day job at the Capitol, seeing the men and women that are working there. It is a long sprint, 45 days. We've just finished day 10 yesterday. Today's day 11. It's 45 calendar days. It's the shortest legislative session in the whole United States. We balance our budget every single year, constitutionally mandated, and I wish Washington could do the same thing. But I've found that anytime you have a full-time legislature, 365 days a year, that just gives them that much longer to screw things up. These guys have to get in and get out, and lots of long days, and so I appreciate their ability to come with us today. So we'll start on the end with Representative White. Just kind of introduce himself, which area of our South County that he represents, maybe a couple of things that he's working on, and we'll go down all the way to Representative Weldon. But in the meantime, if you'll write your questions and just kind of raise them up, we'll pick them up, and while they're introducing themselves, doing their intro, I'll try to sort them out and get them, and we'll get started that way. So think about your questions if you have any, and if you don't right now, just you can raise them as we go throughout the day. So Representative White, just a couple of minutes, just who you are, what you're working on this year, and how much you love your wife, and whatever you want to talk about.
Thank you,
I know his
Francis.
wife, so I can say that.
Thank you, Francis. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen White. It's wonderful to be with all of you this morning. And for my wife, Roxanne, who's right over here too, who I love. Thank you, Francis. She makes everything possible for us to be able to do this. So thank you for coming out early on a Saturday morning in the rain and to be able to be involved. This is what makes Utah and our community so wonderful. So thank you for your involvement. I have the opportunity to serve House District 63. So that covers Mapleton, a little bit of Springville, and a little bit of Spanish Fork. So I'm just curious, how many of you are from those particular areas here? Raise your hands high. Oh, wonderful. Thank you for being here this morning. Also like to thank Francis Gibson. I had the opportunity to serve in the seat that he served in for all of those years and appreciate his mentorship and friendship, and thank our Nebo School District, our superintendent, Rick Nelson here, the entire team, business administrator, everybody here. Thanks for making this possible, and for Scott Barlow and Revere Health. It's just a privilege to be able to serve. This particular session, we're working on a variety of different areas, and we'll be talking about all of those and answering questions. We also want to hear what's on your mind. Specific areas that I'm focusing in on, I've been asked to serve as the co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability. There's one representative and one senator with a lot of people throughout the state working on ways that we can help make home ownership possible for our kids and our grandkids, of helping those prices go down. So that's an area I've been working on. Also involved in public education on the appropriations side of it. Have been asked to serve as the chairman of the Public Education Appropriations Committee. That committee really works closely with the budgets for all kindergarten through 12th grade. That budget is $8.4 billion. So spend a lot of time in those areas to be able to help all of our kids in school and help education to be successful here as well. And working on an item with our Carl Holland, give him a shout out here, who lives right here, Assistant Attorney General for the state, with some things that we're seeing with some child sexual abuse materials that are really concerning as well. And so look forward to talking to you more about it. But thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be able to rub shoulders with you and to be also here to be able to learn from you this morning. Thank you.
I better push the button. So Mike McKell, serving the state Senate, and this is my 13th session. I spent a lot of those with Francis. Francis, thank you for coming. Francis, if he wasn't with us this morning, he would actually be in Bartholomew Pond. He does these cold plunges and has. He already went. Like, legitimately, it'll be snowing outside, and he'll send me a picture cold plunging. It's the weirdest thing, but apparently the Hospital Association recommends it. So, thank you, Rick and Scott. You guys have both been fantastic for years and years doing this. Two of my Senate colleagues also represent South Utah County. They couldn't make it today, so Senator Hinkins represents a portion of Utah County with Darren Owens. Senator Hinkins actually represents all the way from Mapleton to the border down to the Navajo Nation. And off and on we get him up here, but he was out of town with some other constituents this weekend, so he's not here. My job in the Senate's a little bit different this session. Typically, I've chaired committees in the past, but I was elected by my colleagues to serve as our assistant whip and our Senate leadership team. So my responsibility is to help kind of run the ship and make sure we don't screw things up. And it's always debatable whether or not we succeed in that, and I guess that'll be reflected in the questions. But it is good to be here. I serve with some incredible folks, and it is an honor to serve with the gentlemen that are up here this morning. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. It does my heart good to see so many people out here. I'm excited that people are interested and that you're here. We love public discourse, whether it's positive or negative, because it's influence and input we need in the jobs that we do. I represent District 64, which is Spanish Fork, Salem, Woodland Hills, Lakeshore, and a little bit of Benjamin. And so we already had you raise your hands. Some of you are probably in my district. My focus is government operations. I'm the chair of that committee. This time, we're going to be focusing a lot on voting bills and election bills. My own personal emphasis has been on civic education, and some years ago we were able to start the Civic Thought and Leadership Initiative at Utah Valley University. That is a funded program now, and it's trickling down to all the districts. Teachers get CEUs by attending the courses that they teach in the summer. And we taught over 800 students at UVU last semester in American government, which I think is a tremendous achievement for UVU and for the state. I'm also heavily involved in law enforcement, criminal justice. I spent the last year working with the prison to reform. If you didn't know, 60% of our prisoners are repeat offenders. They violate parole and go back to prison. We've got to do better than that. And so we're working on programs to help people reenter society in a positive way and give them the opportunity to succeed. And so I have some bills this year on just that, to help those folks reenter and not reoffend, so that we can save tax dollars and stop prison overcrowding, because that's a problem. And with that, I'll turn it over to Storm and Norman next to me.
Thank you. So I'm Norm Thurston. I represent District 62, which is South Provo, and then the parts of Springville that are behind McDonald's and the West Fields. I've learned to say that. I didn't know that before, but if you're from Springville, you know where that is. So this is going to be, well, I'm just going to also mention my assignments. I'm the chair of General Government Appropriations Subcommittee. One of the things that you may not have appreciated, that there are 8 House chairs of appropriations, plus the chair of executive appropriations. 3 of them are here. So 1, 2, 3 are here, plus Representative Burton that does government operations as a standing committee. So this is a kind of, for South Utah County, this is a big year for us to influence budget and money. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, more in a minute about how much that's going to be. Things that I've been working on, this is kind of a strange year for me, but because I haven't really inherited any sort of big flagship issues. I'm trying to help as best I can work on election stuff and other miscellaneous bills of various shapes and sizes. But generally, I'm concerned about government overreach, especially when it comes to workers, trying to keep the government burden on you from doing your job, have that be reasonable, allow you to do your job. Also, some interesting work, I think, always is needed on health insurance and making sure that we've got the right rules and regulations in place so that the insurance companies aren't profiting off the backs of people's misfortunes, those sorts of things. So, yeah, I just keep getting pieces of paper. All right, I'm just going to go pass this off to Doug.
Okay, thank you. It's good to be with you here today. My name is Doug Welton. I represent District 65, which is just south of here. It's Payson, Santaquin, Elk Ridge, part of Salem, West Mountain, kind of that area right there. And this is my 5th session, and I'm excited to be here. I think engaging with the public is one of my favorite things. For those of you who don't know me, I am the only active classroom teacher in the state legislature, and so that we have a lot of educators here today. Good to see that. My courses, I have kind of a weird group. I have Japanese, and then my degree is actually in history education, and so I teach current issues, philosophy, and debate. And in those classes, like Representative Burton mentioned, I really try to emphasize that kids grow up and they engage in meaningful conversations. They have hard conversations, and to get to a better place. And so I appreciate being able to come here and to engage in that process. Along with General Burton, let me back up. The committees I'm serving on, I'm on Education Committee for the first time. I'm on GovOps. I've been there for five sessions. And then I'm the chair of the new Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. This is a new committee. This is a place where I've kind of wanted to be, having been on city council prior to this. We have a lot of growth that comes down in our area, and it's important that we get our infrastructure right, and not to bag on the Lehigh area or anywhere else like that, but they didn't get it right, and it cost a lot of money to put their transportation infrastructure in, and now it's costing even more money to redo it because it wasn't put in properly, and they're overcrowded up there. So that's been an adventure and in trying to figure out how that works. Going back to what I was referencing with General Burton here, I was one of the teachers that got to participate in the Constitutional Literacy Institute for Teachers, where we brought in teachers from all over the state and taught them the basics and the core ideas behind constitutional government. And it's been fantastic, and I'm so excited to see that spreading throughout as we get to the basics. I've got several bills here. I'll talk about a couple. The big one that I want to talk about, and probably my flagship bill, is efforts on civics education. I've got a bill that would increase civics education for graduation by half credit. and you take your government class, and it will be reclassified to American Constitutional Government and Citizenship, and with a focus on primary course documents. So we're going to look at what the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers say, what Frederick Douglass speeches say, what Constitution and Declaration, obviously, but get students engaged into primary documents on who we are as America, what those founding cores are. They can interact with those however they want. We'll put them in the primary documents. Really excited about this course. These are the kids that are going out to be voting probably their senior year potentially, and if not down the road. And so it's just important that we know how our government works, and we understand the core values that we value. And so I'm excited for that. Thank you. Nilsen Abbott, he's in the back. I'm going to call him out right now. He asked me to report on HB 298. This is a bill that I have that would allow smaller towns like Elk Ridge that do not have a commercial base. They have a hard time getting EMS services and getting people to participate because there's no funding and there's no retirement and there's no benefits like that. So I've got a bill open that would actually extend that. Sometimes you're in a county of the second class like Utah County, and like you've got all the funds in the world, but then we've got towns like Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills and some of those that just have a really hard time getting people into those emergency services. So that's a bill I'm working on. It hasn't gone anywhere yet because it hasn't been assigned to a committee, but hopefully by the end of the week we'll be in a hearing and we'll know where we're at. So we're working on it, Nelson. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one issue that is prevailing more than any, and it is House Bill 67, dealing with collective bargaining. How many of you just kind of raise your hands if that's important to you? There we go. So all of the questions came in very same line of thought, but varying in tenor and tone. And so rather than try to go through each single one, a lot of them are focused on Senator McHale, probably because it hasn't quite passed the Senate yet. But I'm going to have each of these gentlemen just kind of talk about their thought process on 267 and maybe explain why they voted the way they did. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to your questions. There's just so many along the same lines, and I have a feeling that all of you kind of want to know that particular vent or slant on the question. So, Representative Buchanan, House Bill 267, it cleared the House. I think it's on third reading in the Senate, or maybe not in any order. We'll go the other way. Doug, you're going to be probably a positive voice for what this crowd wants to hear, but maybe just talk about, if you'll give us, those who don't know what 267 is, maybe give us some context of the bill, and then maybe explain what you voted, and we'll just go down the line from there.
Okay, HB 267 is a bill that's addressed to public employees, so particularly teachers unions, firefighters, law enforcement, and all your public employees as well. Utah Public Employees Association are kind of all grouped into that. And I'd almost rather be last, but I'll So this is something that the legislature, we've had a bill working in this area for the last 3 years. I'm trying to decide how to say this politically correct and responsive. So I think there's some really good things about this bill. I'll talk about the good and the bad, and I'll add some criticism on both sides. So basically what it's doing is trying to limit collective bargaining. One of the arguments is that unions don't represent all of the teachers or all the firefighters, and that might be true. You might have 30% of a school district, for example, that has a union in their members, and so that means 70% fall outside of that area. And one of the questions is, are they really being represented? I can only speak anecdotally from my experience here in Nebo School District. Nebo has always been very great to work with teachers and to negotiate through those issues. I think one of the problems that our public employees face is it feels like we have a supermajority that can get whatever that they want, and when they get kind of a stick in the eye on an issue, then our response is to make it so they don't have a voice anymore. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. Now, that being said, let me just levy some criticism of the UEA. The UEA, I think, acted in poor faith. One of the most critical things that we talk about up there is your your trust. And like a lobbyist, for example, if a lobbyist lies to you, there's always criticism that lobbyists are like these horrible people, but their currency is trust. And if they lie to you, you will never listen to them again. I have one lobbyist that has no weight with me because he was not truthful in his dealings. And so his effectiveness as a lobbyist is essentially ended. We've got laws surrounding that. That's a different can of worms I don't necessarily want to open. But there was a lot of negotiation with the UEA on Amendment A. And my understanding was usually you have entities that will say, we're opposed, we're neutral, or we're supportive. And that carries a lot of weight, and I respect lobbyist groups that will say, I'm going to be neutral, I'm going to be opposed to this, and they stick with that, versus, we're going to support this, and then they come back and they go the other direction. So everybody I talked to, and obviously I wasn't in on these conversations, but with Amendment A and the negotiation on that, there was an understanding that the UEA was going to be neutral on that, and when they left 2 weeks later, they opposed the bill, and so that did create a little bit of heartache with our leadership team and with the state legislature. And so I can understand why they'd be upset with that, and I think that there needs to be better actions on their part to gain the trust of the public. There are some other, anyway. But that being said, I think this is a heavy-handed approach. I think it's one of those things if you have to have a full membership. So for example, there's a member, I don't know where the bill is right now, so we might have to have Senator McKell explain this because it's been adjusted. But my concern is that if you do away with any sort of collective bargaining or consult or confer, that you're really not going to get more voices or more teachers or more firefighters or more law enforcement officers. You're not going to get more voice because who is the unit that you go to? Who is going to be the one who's talking to all the teachers? Is it the teachers that have the voice of their legislator? And I talk to a lot of teachers. I would bet that I talk to more teachers than collectively any of my good colleagues up here. But who gets the voice? Is it the person that talks the loudest and the most often to those legislators? And is that then what is then passed down for all law enforcement? Or how do you know what the voice of the people is? So anyway, there was some amendments that were wanting to take place. I think one of the ones that I was in favor of is if you get a majority of teachers who vote, they don't have to be in the union or not, but if you get a voice, a majority of those who participate, then that's who gets to represent you. And so you can be not a member of the union and you can say, I think they still represent me the best, or you can create your own different association that you could say, they're really not representing me, and so we're going to go a different route. But it's the voice of the number of people who vote. And I think that's a pretty good way to do it. That's what we do in politics when we talk about elections. The example that's been given is in the governor's race, for example, there's 1 million registered Republicans in the state of Utah. 430,000, a majority of 430,000 chose who actually represented them. And so it wasn't a majority of the million, it was the majority of the 430,000. And so I think that's a better way to go. I know there's movement in the Senate, and so we'll see what happens there. It just seems kind of like a needless move, though. I'll come back to this after they talk. So,
Thank you. So I'm just going to give you I saw a lot of hands go up, but I saw a lot of hands not go up, and so I want to make sure everybody understands what the kind of the technicality. This is actually, it doesn't seem like, but there's some important technicalities to this bill. So it says that a school district or a city or a town or a county or whatever can't negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with a union. So there's two things that are important about that. One is understanding what a union is and understanding what a collective bargaining agreement is. And so I'll just point out right now, in the state of Utah, there's only one example of where that's currently happening. Salt Lake City has unionized their police and fire, and Salt Lake City has negotiated a collective bargaining agreement with their police and fire. So if this bill went into effect in the entire state of Utah, what's happening today that could no longer happen is one thing would happen. So what Provo School District does with PEA, what Nebo School District does with NEA, that would still continue to be allowed. That would not be prohibited. Having said that, and having been a public employee for several years, I think that that's today, but there's a future, right? We have to think about the future, and we should allow our local entities to have the flexibility to deal with their employees the way that they need to deal with them. So I want to just quickly say that there's a real important distinction when it comes nationally about what is a union. A union has to be certified by the National Labor Relations Board. There's a very specific process. There are things that go into that. And that makes sure that that union has capabilities and obligations as well. So there's this very specific process. I don't know, so I'm just going to speak out the top of my head, but I think most across our state of our teacher associations are not actually unions. They are teacher associations. They're groups of people who get together for a common purpose, but they're not certified unions. And also, there's an important difference between a collective bargaining agreement, which is a very specific thing, and a master services contract or a master contract. Most of our districts don't even do master contracts in the state of Utah. They just have terms of employment. They hire people. They do that, whatever. I don't know for sure what Nebo and Provo do, but I believe that Provo does actually have a master contract, and Nebo may have a master contract. But those are not collective bargaining agreements. So there are some very specific things here. So when it comes down to my position on the bill, what I wanted, and I didn't get, and I might get, but we'll never know, well, I guess we will know, is that local districts can negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with a union as long as two things. One is that union is actually an NLRB certified union, so that we know that they've been through the process of actually being a union, and that there are specific rules and guidelines they have to follow, and that their current membership is at least 50% or more than 50% of the covered employees by that CBA. With those two provisions, I think a school district should be able to negotiate that contract. But that's again, this is a very technical world, because for the most part, this isn't happening in our state. And so I think we're having a really important technical discussion about a future, which is important to preserve that. For me, that's important to preserve that opportunity for the possibility down the road that a group of school employees, public employees, teachers, whatever, firefighters, whatever, could unionize, go through the process of becoming a union, and then try to engage their employer through that process. The last thing I would like to technical note is that in the state of Utah, no employer can be forced to negotiate with a union. You can have a union. There was a bunch of employees that were 100% union members, and the employer could still say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to negotiate with you." So it still is that always has been and always will be the case in Utah, that employers still have the opportunity to say, "Yeah, I'm not going to negotiate. We're going to do this some other way." So again, I think that bill does need to be fixed. If those changes come through, I probably would support it. So I hope that's okay to everybody, that there are opportunities there. But in the grand scheme of things, the most important thing to me is that within some parameters, local school districts, governments, et cetera, need to be able to deal with their employees in a way that is effective and healthy for that relationship between the employer and the employees.
Thanks, Norm. The UE8 is not collective bargain, and they told me that regularly on the Hill when I talked about this bill. We don't get easy problems. We get wicked problems, tough things to determine. For me, it was always about representation, and my first step was to go to the Nebo Education Association. It's clear to me that you have a superintendent here that listens, and that they have an open door anytime they need to see Rick Nielsen, and that's what mattered to me. I'm also of the opinion that when the union is 50% plus one, if you talk to anybody in employment law, that's critical. 50% plus one. The UEA did not represent, or does not represent, more than 50% of the teachers. If you look at the numbers, there are many data points to look at, but everyone that I looked at, they don't represent 50% or more of the teachers. And so, bottom line, no, I'm not an expert in education. I was raised by a teacher. I have a family full of teachers, and I've talked to every one of them. And in my family, not one of them belongs to the UEA. Now, they have varying reasons why. But at the end of the day, what I want is for teachers to have the ability and the access to share their grievances. And I think in Nebo School District, we absolutely have that right now. I've talked to the Nebo Education Association president, a wonderful guy that donates time to support teachers. And I feel very comfortably that this district is well represented. And so that's partially why I voted the way I did. I hope what will come out of this, honestly, is that the UEA will work hard to represent teachers the way that they should. If you think about what's happened good for teachers in the last 15 years, It happened at the legislature. Nobody made us do anything. Your pay's doubled in maybe a 15-year period or close to that. We care about teachers, and we're going to be here for you. This is the process. If you want to affect votes, get in our ear and talk to us. I talk to Doug all the time because he's kind of my connection. But there's no hate or malice here. We love you guys, and we know that you take care of our children. Every one of my kids has been a product of public schools, as have I. Thanks.
Thank you. Let me just say how much I appreciate the Nebo Education Association. They've been on the Hill. They've been on the Hill multiple times this year. If you're part of the Nebo Education Association, would you raise your hand? I see several of you. I think your organization is doing it right. When Doug started talking, I'm going to call him Doug. It's I know it's respectful to say representative, but Doug's been a good friend. When we started talking, I do think that the UEA has not represented teachers as well as they could have. I'm not a vindictive person. That's not my nature. I think the Nebo Education Association has been fantastic, and I think your leadership on the Hill has taken the right approach. And I know you've been working hard on a compromise bill with the Senate, and there is a substitute. I think the substitute addresses, Norm, I think it addresses one of your concerns, 50% plus one. Your other concern was so technical. You and I are going to talk afterwards. If you don't know this, Norm went to Princeton, and he's one of the smartest people I know. So I have to take notes and review my notes when I'm trying to figure out what Norm is telling me. He's one of the smartest people I know. But as far as this issue, the Senate is unique. We hold a committee hearing, and then I almost view it as a big committee hearing. And I have a question about the sex offender registry, and it's going to be important when I talk about that. We vote on the Senate floor twice, and on second reading, it's almost like another big committee hearing where we vet issues. This bill was debated for a long time on second reading. It's sitting on the third reading calendar, circled with a substitute. I'm told that many groups are neutral on the bill with the substitute, and I'm going to say that with the caveat that many groups that are neutral don't like the bill, and I think that's fair to say, right? I'm looking at my Nebo education guy. I think that's probably fair to say that with the substitute, some groups are neutral, but they don't want to be, and I recognize that. There are a few things that the bill does that I think are important. When we look at the technical parts of the bill, this does say if you use a public facility, we've got to have a reasonable fee. And so obviously I phone a friend and I call Rick and I said, well, what's a reasonable fee? And he says, well, probably it's going to be zero. So that impact is very, very minimal. I know the PTA gets to use our buildings for free or nearly free, and that financial perspective is it's good to know. It also, I didn't know this, and our state government is big, and we learn through the process, but our union, our UEA representative, that's not a teacher, actually is on state retirement, and it eliminates that. I don't think the UEA employee should have URS benefits. They're not a state employee. I don't know how long that's existed, but that's something that's eliminated as well. There may be other amendments to this bill. I appreciate those in the room. I know there's folks in the room from the Nebo Education Association that have worked on this. I think we live in the best district. I know Rick's got an open door, and the last thing we want to do is pit our Nebo Association against Rick at the school board. But right now, I do plan to vote for the bill with the substitute and the amendments. That's where I'm at. You've got Senator Hinkins is not here. He's got a bill that does the opposite. For those that want to share some love to Senator Hinkins, I think he will vote no. And Darren Owens, who represents parts of Santaquin, I think he's probably 50-50, but I think he'll probably vote no if I had to guess. So that's kind of where I'm at with that explanation.
A lot of good information has been shared here coming down the line. I've observed as this bill has moved forward, there's been some information out in the news and on social media and even emails that is a little bit, so there's some misinformation, there's some rumors, there's some inaccuracies. So as I was looking at the bill, going and just asking some questions, baseline questions, I'll run through these really quickly here. First question, will public labor, and this is going to provide context to some of those rumors and misinformation that's floating out there, especially on social media. Will public labor unions continue to exist? Yes. Will public labor unions continue to collect membership dues? Yes. Will public labor unions be able to collect membership dues with auto pay set up by union members? Yes. Will public labor unions be able to continue to negotiate on behalf of their members, fight for teacher salaries, benefits, and workplace conditions? Yes. Would public labor unions be banned from using public buildings, parks, community centers, libraries, and the like? No. Will public labor unions be able to meet in public buildings if they're treated the same way as any other organization that uses a public building? Yes. Will members of the public union be able to elect who leads the public labor union? Yes. Are teachers the only public labor union affected by this bill? No. Will HB 267 reduce the amount of funding for teachers? No. So those are some questions I've seen out there, just clarifying what this bill maybe does and what it doesn't do as well. Looking into those details, there's a couple of other little aspects that there's some misinformation that's floating out there. What this bill does, as it is right now without the substitute coming forward, it prevents public sector collective bargaining. It prevents taxpayer resources from subsidizing public labor unions. For public labor unions that use payroll deductions to collect dues, it provides greater transparency for public employees of how those unions spend their dues. And it also provides educators the potential for some optional personal professional liability insurance to give them additional peace of mind if they're to be covered in case of an employment dispute. So those are some things that I've seen that are kind of spreading out there that might not be accurate, and some of these things will be clarified in this potential substitute as well. So looking at all that information and also diving into what's local right here, just echo what the colleagues and friends have said here about Nebo School District, that this would not affect what's happening in Nebo. Nebo's an example to our entire state. And then looking statewide, in the position I've been asked to be in the public education appropriations, the budget side, I've visited school districts and teachers and classrooms throughout the state last several months. Some of the concerns I'm hearing from teachers in other parts of the state are being addressed in this proposed bill as well. Now, I've also received emails that are in opposition to this. And as I've been tallying and tracking all of this, interestingly, the majority of emails I've been getting that are opposed to this are coming from people that don't live in Utah. They put their addresses. Most are coming from Washington, California, Colorado, DC, and Massachusetts, which I thought was kind of interesting and ironic about the national interest. That's what's just happening here as well. And so with all of the input I received, and the vast majority of the people that are contacting me from the area that I get to represent or ask me to support this, recognizing, balancing, there are friends right here and colleagues who've come up and met with me on the Hill as well that have concerns with this. So with all of this laying out, I voted in support of this. And so we'll see where it happens in the Senate with the potential substitute. And for everybody that I'm able to serve with in House District 63, I wrote out my voting rationale and additional information here. And I have copies here in case you'd like to get that. And I'd be happy to visit with you more a little bit afterwards. So thanks for asking the question.
You're going to need more copies.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing real quick? Just going back, we beat this, cover this pretty well, but I would like to give a shout out to the NEA. One of the things that I hoped, and I worked with the sponsor of the bill on, I've tried to convince him to do is to put some language that allows, that defines what consult and confer and collective bargaining is, because I think there is a big difference. If we have that consult and confer piece, I think it's worked really well in Nebo School District. Our Nebo Education Association has done a really, really good job at that, so I appreciate that. Also, on a side note, my emails, and mine might be a little skewed because I am a teacher, but I had one person that asked me to vote for it, and everyone else, and they were all from Utah, and they were all from my district, asked me to vote against the bill.
Yeah, I was in it. I was in the same boat. I had zero emails from anybody in my district in favor of the bill. But I think that Doug mentions a really important point, which is we want to make sure that whatever we do, that what's working in Provo and Nebo right now is still allowed. This negotiate, consult, all of the sort of stuff, that's a healthy part of the process. And I think some of the school districts actually, in addition to working with their local education association, also have a separate track where they're meeting with principals, or they're meeting with parents, or meeting with others when it comes to sort of like the salary, the pay, the work conditions, those sorts of things. So it's not just one organization has the ear of the district. They are using a multi-prong approach to listen to voices who may not feel comfortable that, I mean, NEA is doing a great job, but there may be one or two teachers out there that aren't feeling like that they're part of that. And so they want to make sure that they're hearing from everybody and they're getting that voice as well. So again, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, representatives. And I hope that it fits the tenor of what you're wanting, as opposed to going through every single question. But every single question, as I read them, were similar in their focus about wanting to know this. I know that after we're done, if you still want to stick around and maybe approach one of the representatives or Senator McKell individually, if you want more in depth of what's going on with this bill, they'll be here for a few minutes after as well, so you can do that. So I do have some other questions. I've tried to spread them out. Some of the questions are just very general. There weren't anyone specific, so I just picked you out and put you on the spot. So General Burton, I say general because of your long military career, but Representative Burton, would you just pick one of the questions? And I'll ask, we've got about 40 minutes, and I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to wrap up, so about 35 minutes left. But if you'll just maybe in 90 seconds take a question and give us an answer, please.
All right, thank you, Francis. One of the questions, and I imagine that this is on everybody's mind, is the elections bills and what we're doing up there with elections bills. The question was, I have a hard time believing that our election system is broken in Utah. A lot of the concern seems to come from Trump's 2020 election denial. Why are we spending so much time on this issue? And so I would begin by saying, we try not to be tone deaf. Maybe it's viewed that we are at times, but we try hard to understand what people are thinking. There have been myriad poll surveys since the last election. Deseret News, Hinckley Institute, one just came out a couple of weeks ago from the Sutherland Institute, trying to get the temperature of people reference elections, what they think about elections. And I think everybody would agree that as a nation, we've probably lost faith in institutions. And why have we lost faith in institutions? Because the people that lead them are not ethical, that's why. And so we've lost faith in many respects in institutions, and many Americans have lost faith in the voting process. Some haven't, but many have. And also, we conducted a couple of audits here post-election, and there were some concerns that we found in the audits. We found that dead people voted in the audit. We found that folks with kids on missions voted for their kids and signed their name as if it was their kid's name. We found that people that maybe shouldn't have voted. And so the national poll shows that more than 80% of Americans believe we should show ID when we vote. Now that number, granted, is smaller in Utah, but it's more than half of Utahns believe we should show ID when we vote. And so to that end, I have a bill that would require that. Now, you folks have heard my colleagues talk, and the reality is that we give and take a lot up there on the Hill. And so this bill will probably end up a little different than it is currently. But what the bill says is that you would receive your voting materials just like you do now. You would have the time, and most Utahns said they like the vote by mail primarily because they have lots of time to think about it, talk about it, interact with their significant other. I got probably 100 phone calls over the election on some of the things that were on it, questions. You have the time to do that. The difference is once you seal that envelope, you would need to take it down to a drop box, and somebody would look at your ID, stamp that envelope as cured, and put it in a lockbox. That chain of custody would be maintained. It would be locked and secured until voting day. The beauty of that is this. Number one, ID is checked. Number two, so why can't, the thing that bothered Utahns more than anything in these polls was why does Utah have to wait a week to turn out voting results? Well, we're one of like 4 or 5 states that were sitting there forever waiting to release results. Under this, it would be easy for the clerks to release the results the night of the election. In fact, the bill requires them to do that. You would see the night of the election how it turned out. Now, in the case of the absentee votes, I voted in Germany for 4 years and all over the country. That would remain. And also, there's an opt-in for vote by mail in this bill. If you're infirm, if you're handicapped, if you're having a hard time getting out of your house, you can vote by mail, but you have to opt in. And one of the things that may be negotiable in the bill is how often you have to opt in. Right now, it's every year. We're talking about making that a little longer. But the concern is this. Right now, you can register to vote and vote your lifetime without ever showing your identification again. And that is a concern for most Americans, and that's why we're talking about a voting bill. Final thing, this bill, I don't know. Is there any postal employees in the room? I don't want to be negative. I think the post office is a wonderful organization. And however, if you watch the elections, one of our congressional elections may have been swayed the other way because several hundred votes, and it was that close, were mishandled, and they were sent to Las Vegas, and they did not arrive in time to be counted for the election. Another candidate may have won that election. We'll never know. But this takes the post office out of the back end of this equation because now you turn it in yourself at a drop box. And by the way, we've done the data. 65% of Utahns turned their vote in at a drop box. They did not mail it in. And so that gives you an idea that Utahns understand that they want their vote to be counted, and they're a little concerned about getting it in on time. So that is why there are some election bills up there. Senator McKell is also working on it on his side. I think we'll have some compromise as we go along, but we will have some sort of election reform bill, and that's why. And then really quick, the other question that's on some people's mind, and it's relative to this. Senate Bill 54, how many of you know what it is? Anybody? Okay, it was drafted a decade or more ago by a senator who, by his own admission, was trying to save the caucus system, and that's why he claims to have done it. It permitted people to do signature path to getting on a ballot. I have never done signature path, and I never will. That's just me. If I can't get the preponderance of the delegates, then I'm not going to be running for this office. I do not love being in the legislature. It's not a career. It's public service, period. And so that's me speaking. That's just how I feel. Senate Bill 54 allows you, though, to do a signature process to get on the ballot. Many of you saw the famous election of 2024 where it was alleged that Governor Cox wasn't a legitimate candidate. I disagree with that. I've read all of that data. He was a legitimate candidate, but some felt that he couldn't make it through the caucus, so he shouldn't have been on the ballot. Bottom line is, I believe that the caucus system should replicate what the popular vote is. And we have a problem in our state right now because it does not replicate the popular vote. So we could talk this point till noon, and I'd love to talk to you more about it. We know that we need to do some things to correct the inequities that we have. We need more people getting involved in the process. Senate Bill 54 repeal. I don't know that there are enough votes to repeal that. I know there's a move to do that this year. I don't know that there'll be enough votes to repeal it. But we realize that we've got some issues, and so we'd love to hear from you on that as to how we attack that very difficult issue. Someone asked about legal actions. Again, I'd remind you, our republic is clunky. It's not smooth. It doesn't operate as wonderfully and smoothly as you may like, but it's done that way for a reason. You need to get to us. We're elected to vote for you. If we don't vote for you, don't vote for us, and you can put somebody else in to do that you feel more comfortable with. That's the way the system works. But I will always listen to you, and I realize that I'm not infallible, and I don't have all the answers. None of us do. But we try very hard to dive deep into these issues in ways that maybe you don't have the time to do.
Representative Burton, thank you. In fear that you may beat me up, That 90 seconds was like dog year 90 seconds.
Was that 90 seconds? Did you say 90 seconds? Never give a politician microphones, Francis.
You know, he's older than me, but he's very strong. He could take me out. But thank you for that thoroughness. Representative McHale, Senator, and I said Representative. I forgot.
I think that's an upgrade. I'm happy to be called representative. Let me tackle a couple of these. I will say on the election bill, there will be a Senate bill. We've both been tasked with finding a solution. I don't think there's any appetite in the Senate to get rid of vote by mail. So we'll find solutions, but we'll have a different approach. Let me jump in. I've got two questions about why did I vote yes for SB 155. When we did introductions, Carl Holland got called out. He's from the Attorney General's office. He actually came and testified against this bill in committee. And this would change the sex offender registry. There's a pocket of people that Senator Weiler is considering removing from the sex offender registry. Rather than it'd be after 32 years. It came out of the committee, and I supported it sending out of the committee. One of the things I said in the committee is I have a lot of concerns with the bill. And when it hits the floor, I'll probably vote against it. I've got enough concerns with it. But we have a process that we follow. I think our process is important. And in the Senate, we do 2 readings in the Senate. And the first reading is almost a big committee hearing. And this is an issue that I think rises to the level that it should be heard by the full Senate. I think all of my colleagues should weigh in on it. Obviously, we believe in second chances, but we believe in protecting the public. I struggle with the bill, but I want my colleagues to be able to weigh in. I passed the white collar crime registry. I thought that was a really important tool. Last legislative session, I reformed our sentencing commission. I felt like it was way too anti-prosecutor, way too anti-police. I know the sheriff's back there. I think he weighed in on that. I think we had a sentencing commission that was incredibly light on crime. Because of that, I've got some concerns with Senate Bill 155, but I trust our process. So I want my colleagues to weigh in. I'm going to take another one really quick. This can be fast. Dennis, I didn't see you when you came in, or I would have shook your hand. It's been a long time. Dennis has been was a delegate for a long time, a great teacher in Nebo, and one of the coolest people I know. And he asked about Social Security. There will be a tax cut. I sent out a poll. A lot of you did the poll. The 2 issues that people are worried about the most, inflation and tax cuts. That when I say a lot of people, that was my survey down here that I saw. I think you'll see a tax cut in the neighborhood of $150 million. And some of that could be Social Security, and some of that could be income tax. Right now, I don't think the legislature does a very good job marketing. If you are making less than $75,000 a year, you pay no tax on your Social Security. We have bumped up that exemption. That's a pretty high dollar amount. Again, if you're a senior and your income is below $75,000, we tax 0 of your Social Security. What we're looking at right now, I don't know that it will eliminate it entirely, but we are considering bumping that exemption higher than $75,000. But I think there's appetite to impact income tax and Social Security both. We've been able to cut income tax 5 years in a row, and when we cut income tax, we see growth in the economy. So that's the approach we're taking. So stay tuned, but I hope that answers the question. Good seeing you, and I'm happy to talk afterwards.
Thank you. So just to kind of put it in context, when revenue comes in, if you cut taxes, that's revenue that comes out. That's no longer going to the general fund. It takes about $46 million of pulling it out of the budget, and if you were to do that, you would wipe away Social Security income tax for 85% of Utah. So of the seniors who are on Social Security, $46 million would be the price tag, and 85% of those folks would not have to pay Social Security tax. If you wanted to eliminate it on everybody, that price tag is $100 million.
160, it's got
So it's
160.
it's quite big. Now, currently in the state of Utah, we started off 6, 7, 8 years ago at a flat tax of 5%. The legislature over the years, when I was there, and they've continued to do that, lower that, we're at about 4.55%. And the thought was, how do we move that to 4.5%? That is almost an $80 million price or $60 million price tag to go from 4.55 to 4.0. Yep. And so there's a balance of how much money can you pull out of the general fund, still have the money to run the government that needs to be ran, while still making sure that we're lowering taxes. So big debate, lots of questions going on. It'll be interesting to see how all of that works out in the end.
And ultimately, I think we'll balance it. I think you'll see that exemption come up in an income tax cut. I think you'll see both. That's my prediction.
Representative White, and then we'll go to Welton and Thurston.
Thank you. Just tagging on a little bit, I had a question about a tax cut potentially as well. We've talked about a couple options that are being discussed: Social Security, maybe income tax as well, maybe a child tax credit as well. Should one be over the other? Should it be a combination of all? I think it's great that we're talking about tax cuts. We get to do another tax cut this year. This would be the 5th consecutive year of tax cuts in the state. Over the last 4 years, tax cuts have tuned up to about $1.2 billion in tax cuts. So it's great that Utah is in a position to do that where other states aren't right now. I'm kind of curious, could we just do a little straw poll, get your input? Tax cuts. Are you leaning towards maybe tax cuts with a combination of income, child tax cut, and Social Security? Maybe it's kind of one option, kind of as a package to help those areas, or in the area of Social Security. So it's a straw poll a little bit. How many of you would feel a preference to do kind of a combination of cuts? Child tax cut, income tax, and Social Security. Just raise your hands. We're all friends here. Okay? Thanks. The other kind of the option is just all in Social Security. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the input. These are the conversations and discussions that are happening right now of what could be done to be able to help the greatest amount of people in the biggest way as well. So thank you. I have a couple questions about housing. Couple of questions. Who should have more control over housing policy, like zoning? Should the state or local municipalities? First one on that one. High level, I think the biggest challenge the state is facing right now is housing. The costs are extremely, extremely high. The average median price right now is about $515,000 for a home. To get into that home, your household would need to be making $153,000 a year to avoid the median house price. So what can be done while respecting the free market? What can be done to be able to help so our kids and grandkids can be able to afford, and especially first-time home buyers, get into that first home and start building that equity and that generational wealth? A lot of it comes down to local decisions of zoning and land use decisions. And there's infrastructure costs, and there's mortgage rates, and all these things that combine to it. So the question before us here is local decisions about housing policy. I think the best decisions are made on the most local level, and that's by cities and by city councils. And a lot of those decisions with home prices kind of comes down to two areas. The two biggest costs of a home is how much land the house is on, so the lot size, and the size of home on that lot. And so if we're looking at what can we do for our kids and grandkids with home ownership, getting that price point down where they could get into their first home, that would require smaller homes on smaller lots so they're more affordable to be able to purchase your very first home. And those decisions are based on the local level. So that's the discussion and the tug of war a little bit. How should the state or maybe the legislature encourage cities, and what should cities be doing as well? It's kind of some built-in tug of war between it two. On the one hand, cities are political subdivisions of the state. They get all their legal authority from the state, but you don't want the state getting into the local weeds of local decisions. So those are what's being talked about this particular legislative session. And the last point with housing on this one, about 20% of the cost of a home is due to government regulations. So we're looking at what can be done to cut government regulations and the speed of process of getting approvals through to be able to build new homes. So that's going to be a big area with some housing bills this year, is cutting out some unnecessary regulations and to be able to increase the speed of construction so we can help address our supply-demand issue in the state.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions here. The first one, is a great question. I'm not sure how to answer it. It says, can you give me an example of a time that you listened to your constituents and changed your mind? And I think the hard part about that is I don't know if I can think of a specific time. I talk to constituents all the time, and it's constant. Oh, Jackie says she changed my mind, and that's probably true. But here's the thing: when we're a citizen legislature, for me to know everything about everything that happens up there, like I don't. Like I've got my area of expertise, and sometimes I'll look to Representative McKell for law questions, and I'll look to Representative White for higher education and other policy decisions, and Representative Burton understands the law and military, and Representative, Norm knows all things about economics, and so we were just sitting over there and I was talking to him about economic issues. So I have great ideas that are brought to me all the time. I think one of the things that kind of goes back to the debate coach in me is I think it's really important to listen to different people and different voices, and I think we get better outcomes when we do that. And while I don't have a specific situation, one of the things that I'm often reminded of as a servant in this position is I think back to the founding of America and the Constitution, and you had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists who sat down and they had really hard conversations, but they had everybody in the room, people that agreed with them and people that didn't agree with them. And because of that, they were able to stand firm on certain principles, but because of that, you were able to get the Constitution that included the Bill of Rights. And so that's kind of, that has your freedom of religion and freedom of press and Second Amendment and all of those things. And so that's kind of the approach that I try to take. And so I don't know that I can point to a specific thing, but I'm in constant conversation with my constituents, and I've certainly changed my position on a lot of bills. The other question is a great one. I actually ran a bill kind of in this space that was small potatoes to I think what we're trying to solve here. But the question is dealing with the opioid settlement we're getting. So we're getting something like $130 million in an opioid settlement from the opioid manufacturers, where we're getting money back where they knowingly prescribed and overprescribed opioids that they knew were highly addictive and caused a lot of problems. And so with this settlement, there's a question of what we try to do. And so the question here is, we have naloxone that we've been giving, but there's another a drug out there called naltrexone. How do I say that? Naltrexone. All right, and it costs twice as much up front, but it kills all the cravings, and it's a compound, and it's got a very high impact on ending drug use. And so the question is the legislator willing to look into using the settlement funds for this treatment? And I would say absolutely yes. I don't have anything long and complicated, but if we can get people off of drugs and solve the price, the cost. I mean, sometimes I look at this as like, sometimes in government we look at the cost right now, and it's like changing your oil, and if you don't do it, then you have really expensive costs on the back end. And sometimes we look at changing the oil in the state legislature, and we're like, oh, that's too much money, we can't change the oil, and then it leads to a big problem down the road. Kind of going back to the transportation issue I was indicating in Lehigh. I think this is one of those areas. If you can spend a little bit more money up front, and it's not just that we get people back into society, or that we stop spending money on more treatments because you have to continue to treat and continue to treat and continue to treat. But there's also a positive impact on society when you get people out of the drug addiction cycle and they become productive members of society. And so now it's not just you're continuing to treat, but you're actually adding to the economy, and you're adding to humanity by allowing these people to break their addictions. And so I'm very much in favor of that. This is one of those areas, when we go back to the do I listen to constituents, I don't know a lot about this area, and so I need to do a little bit more research. But what I've heard and what I understand, I think this is definitely the way to go. So I'd very much be in favor of that. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things. Real quick, I want to follow up on Social Security taxes. Since I'm going to leverage Mike's outing of my educational experience, there we go. So I'm going to tell you the problem with our current system, the way we're taxing Social Security. If you have a $40,000 Social Security benefit, so that's on the high end, and you're getting $40,000 in a pension from your employer, so you're getting $80,000 a year in. Guess what? Your Social Security benefit is entirely taxed 100% at the state rate. That's $1,820. You have a good friend, works for a similar company, has $40,000 Social Security benefit, but instead of getting a pension, they put their money in a Roth IRA. They have $1 million in their Roth IRA. Guess what they're paying on their Social Security benefit? Zero. So the problem is that we're perpetuating this cliff, which is that if you earn $75,000, you don't pay. If you earn $75,001, you pay the full thing. So we need to fix that. We need to fix that solution. So if we can't get rid of all of it, at least we ought to fix that cliff, have some sort of a graduated scale so that makes that fair. How can the state continue to afford to continue to cut taxes? And yet, yes. How much this year? So let me just explain the process real quick. So every year in December, Executive Appropriations Committee looks at the revenue forecast, they look at the budget stuff, the budget priorities, and they decide as a group, and I believe it was a unanimous vote this year, to set aside $165 million for tax cuts, unspecified. This is the money that is now set aside for us to have these wonderful debates and discussions about. That will happen again next year. They'll look at the revenue forecast, they'll look at our expenditure growth, and they'll say, okay, how much can we afford? So every year in December, that gets decided. This is how much we can afford this year. There will come a year when they'll say, no, we can't do tax cuts this year. That will happen. For a severe economic downturn, there will be a year when they say, well, we can't do it this year. But we can continue to do that year after year after year. The reason why we can do that is because our economy grows. These tax cuts are almost entirely funded out of economic growth, which recognizes also the importance of not over-regulating the economy so that we hurt economic growth. We have good policy that leads to economic growth. Economic growth leads to revenues. Revenues allow us to cut taxes. Cutting taxes helps the economy grows. And I think you can see how that cycle should work in theory, as long as we're not getting railroaded by some other macroeconomic impacts. Okay, also protecting Utahns from health insurance companies. So if you went and bought a piece of furniture that was $1,000 and you knew that there was a $500 rebate, who do you think should get that $500 rebate? Should it be you or the person that sold you the furniture? You, right? That's how the world works. If you go to one of Francis's hospitals and your insurance company it's a $1,000 service, but they've negotiated a $500 discount, so how much should you pay? And the answer is you should pay $500, right? Because that's the deal. That's the deal between you and the provider. There's one example that's not the case. If you go to the pharmacy and it's a $1,000 drug and your insurance company has negotiated a $500 rebate, you'd think that you would get that, right? But you don't. That $500 is being taken by, I'm going to say pocketed. Is that a fair word to say? That $500 is being pocketed by your insurance company or by somebody else to use for something else. You're not getting it. So the bill that has passed the House is off to the Senate. I hope they will love it. It's a great bill. Trust me, it's the best bill you've ever seen.
I've never seen a bill that you guys sponsor that's not the best.
There's nothing
In your own
funner
word.
than killing a Norm Thurston bill.
Yeah, so that one takes that concept and applies it to public employees' health plan and makes sure that PEHP never pockets those rebates. All of the rebates get back to the consumers. They've been piloting it for 3 years now with insulin and with EpiPens. It works fine. No, it's a great thing. The other bill that's the companion bill creates the same opportunity for private companies to do the same thing. So if you're working for a small business or actually in this case the bill, if you're working for a large employer, they would have the option of doing that for their employees. So it sets those wheels in motion. So hopefully those two bills will catch up to each other in the Senate and we'll be able to talk about that as a package. And hopefully Mikkel will be not mad at me now and not kill them.
So I think that's answers. Did any of you have any questions that I've given you that you did not answer?
I'll be quick. I had a question about higher ed. Update on higher ed, budget cuts. Could there be a less extreme way to limit spending? I'm actually excited about it's not a budget cut, it's a reallocation. So we've charged higher ed. We started a little high, we said 10% we want you to reallocate. If I am a president at a university, I think this is exciting. I've had a chance to meet with nearly every president. We have programs, some you may want to call it fluff on campus. We have programs that are not responsive to our economy. We have economic needs in this state, and higher ed needs to be part of that. Down here, MTech, our tech school, is very responsive to the economy, and higher ed needs to catch up. We're not doing budget cuts. It's a reallocation. It's going to be done over time. It's going to be done smartly. But I think it is a huge, huge opportunity for a university president. We tell them they need to reallocate. They get to blame the legislature. When they go before their Senate faculty, that's difficult. But we have market-based needs. We have a growing aerospace industry, and we need to be responsive to that. and having this requirement that you reallocate your budget. I think I actually like this question. I don't think we're overreaching. I don't think it's extreme. I think it's long overdue. And I think higher ed, I think behind the door, I think a lot of presidents are really excited by the opportunity of getting to reallocate their budgets.
So when we talk about reallocate, you guys just correct me if I'm wrong, but it's looking at your entire budget. The original thought was we're just going to take 10% back. When you think about a University of Utah, 10% for them could be millions of dollars. And then the legislature said, well, instead of giving it back or us not reallocating that money to you again, just take the money and look within your own system and say, how can we spend this better based on workforce needs? Now, and at risk of offending a European art history major that may be in the room, that might be a program that the university invests and says, maybe I want to pull $500,000 or $50,000 or whatever I'm spending on that and put it into an engineering program or a program that our economy needs the most. And so that's just a little example, but reallocation means I'm going to look within my system and say, what's producing the needs in the community or in our state and what's not? And can we move some of that money and put that back into workforce areas to help young men or young women get jobs that are going to actually pay back that tuition that they're paying? Is that a good?
Yeah, and honestly, I whoever said this question, I'm happy to meet with you. I love the fact that we're doing it. I think it's long overdue, and behind the door, there's a lot of presidents that are actually excited by this because they get to do what they want to do, and they get to blame us anyways. So I mean, I think it's cool.
Who else had another question that didn't get answered? Representative Thurston.
Yeah, this is an important one. I'm glad we didn't have to skip this one. House Bill 269, which is out of the House, I believe, and into the Senate. Privacy protection in sex-designated areas. That sounds like a pretty benign topic. What this has to do with is on-campus housing at Utah's universities. So right now we have men's housing, we have women's housing. I don't know if any of them are actually doing co-ed housing. When I went to school back east, there was, at that school that Mike keeps mentioning, we had this thing called co-ed housing. Anybody could live in co-ed housing. You didn't know who your roommate was going to be because you show up at school and they say, this is your roommate. Could be a dude from China, could be a woman from Africa, could be anybody. Could be anybody, that was your roommate. And people just dealt with it, and it was great. And they loved it. It's not like they dealt with it, they loved it. So what this bill says is that our public institutions will have 3 categories of housing: men's housing, women's housing, and then gender neutral housing, as I think is what they've called it. And everybody will have a choice of 2 of those. You can choose 2 of those based on your biological sex. If you're a biological male, you can choose men's housing or gender neutral. If you're a biological female, you can choose women's housing or gender neutral. The only thing that you can't choose is if you're a biological male, you can't choose women's housing, and if you're a biological female, you can't choose men's housing. That's what's the limitation of those things would be. It's not a perfect solution. It is a solution. It creates opportunities. I think it creates as best as we can an opportunity for everybody to find a place where they feel safe and where they feel comfortable. And like I mentioned in committee, if everybody was 25 or 30, I wouldn't care. Just deal with it. You're adults, you figure it out. But remember, college kids are living in on-campus housing. A lot of them are 17 or just barely 18. That's a lot to deal with. In fact, we even have college kids as young as 15 and 16 living in on-campus housing. There's a lot to think about when you're that young. And so just saying, look, these are your options. We want you to feel safe. We want you to feel comfortable. We want everybody to feel safe, everybody to feel comfortable. That's what the bill does. That's why I support it, not because it's perfect, not because it addresses everybody's preferences and everybody's concerns, but because it at least puts us in a world where that maybe could work out. I think everybody here except for Mikkel has voted for that bill.
I will vote for it when it hits the Senate for sure, though. Don't throw me out like that. I'm going to be a yes.
Getting ready to wrap up. Are there any questions that you guys didn't address that was given to you? Okay.
The question was, is the legislature considering reducing Utah's reliance on federal government funds? And my answer back would be, I think we're the least reliant in the entire country regarding federal funds. During COVID, most states, when they took the federal money, had to use it for daily operations. We did not do that. We didn't have to. We have a huge rainy day fund because we pay our bills and we balance our budget. We took generational projects on, like expanding mental health facilities and helping build new cancer institutes in Utah. That's what we did with that money. So we are not terribly reliant on federal funds in Utah, and I think you can all be proud of that. That's the one thing that no matter how this session ends, I'm always proud of the fact that we're fiscally sound and responsible, that we don't spend money we don't have.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're just going to close here for a few minutes and just kind of give you guys what you perceive going on. As I said before, today's actually a legislative day, one of the 45, and we're not up there doing anything. So day 11 today, and that means we've got 34 left, and the days will get longer. And I think most of you commute back and forth every day. I don't think any of you stay in Salt Lake full time. Let me just say, I can say this because they're not paying me to do this. This is a volunteer that asked me if I would do it. But I can go each one of those gentlemen and tell you where I've disagreed with them and tell you where I've agreed with them. 0.05 is the blood alcohol limit. And that was something we didn't know that would pass or not. And I would say Representative Thurston is sort of a Jedi Knight that plays mind tricks on people. And you vote for something like, what in the heck did I just do? And that was a big piece of legislation for him to lower the blood alcohol limit to try to curb impaired driving on the streets. Representative Welton is, I remember he replaced Representative Mark Roberts, and when he came in, I was just trying to get to understand him. He's a debate coach. As the last person I want to stand in front of and try to get an argument. He tends to know both sides of every issue pretty well. Very, very responsive to his profession, but he loves his kids that he teaches. If you have a kid who gets to go to class with him, consider your young man or young woman very lucky. Very, very strong. Representative Burton, when he was running for office, I didn't support him. I supported his opponent. But yet I'll tell you, he's probably one of my best friends right now. And the fact that his love for the country and his service in the military, I can think of nobody better I would rather have serve if I lived in his district. Representative McKell was a delegate of mine, wasn't even a representative. And I remember sitting down from him and talking to him when I was running and trying to earn his support. We were the first time I met him, it was a happy sumo over sushi. And if you know Representative McKell, he's not short of opinions. And he let me know about it really quickly. Now he's a senator, but I will tell you he's very responsive and listens. Representative White replaced me. And I think when I was getting ready to leave, it's like, I served 13 years, and I tried to be responsive to everybody. I didn't want just anybody to replace me. I read his email last night, man. He's got every form of social media covered and a detailed list of why he voted for whatever. In terms of constituent communication, I think he would probably rank top 5 in terms of getting his message out there and understanding why he did something. I think for me, I don't expect my representatives to vote the way I want them to vote every time. And if I want you to vote the way I want to every time, then I better go run for office. That's just going to happen. But what I do expect is for you to be able to defend your vote and explain to me why you voted that way. And I think each one of these guys can do that, and each of the women who serve as well. So thank you. There was a question. Do constituents' opinions matter? Are you supposed to be representing them? I think most of you tried to answer that with your 267 vote. But I'm just going to ask this last question that came up because it's listed to everybody. But as you close, and we have like 6 minutes left, so just kind of close quickly. But as you close, how much does party politics play into things? And I need to vote for this bill so they will support my bill. So if you just kind of think of that in closing, how much do party politics play? And how much of it do you support bills so someone else will support your bill? That's the concluding question. If you'll just kind of answer that, and any closing thoughts, seriously, 90 seconds. I'm going to raise my hand. So we'll start this time with Representative Thurston. You get to go first, and then we'll work our way down, and you'll be last.
Yeah, that last question, that I would say for me it's 0. But I think I established myself early on as being willing to just vote the way that I'm going to vote. And Francis can tell you, I think leadership got used to that early on, and they would come and say, how are you going to vote on this bill? I'll say, I'm a no. And they're like, could you be a yes? And I'll say, no. And they're like, okay. And that's just the way it's been. And it's been nice for me because I haven't had that pressure over the years, because I just say where I'm going to be. I give my reasons. Sometimes they'll say, what would it take to get you to change your vote? And I can say this is what it would take to get me to change my vote. Sometimes I get that, sometimes I don't. But I think for me, party politics has not been something that I feel like has been too much pressure in my life. It's a real thing. People want to get their bills passed, especially certain people who have priorities that they want to look powerful or want to get their agenda or whatever. But I think most legislators, if they feel comfortable just being themselves, being authentic, the system works. The system is working out. And just thank you all for coming. Some of you have been up to the Capitol before. If you're coming up again this year and you're in my district, let me know. I'd love to stop by and say hello and hopefully get you to sit on the House floor and see it right up front and personal. So thank you again.
Okay. I would say no. Politicians that stick their finger in the air to see whether the wind's blowing are the worst kind. You vote based on what you believe the preponderance of your population wants you to do, and that's what we always try to do. Really quickly, the biggest threat for us right now is not an outside adversary, it's foreign debt, and it's debt to foreign nations. And in Utah County, one thing you can be very happy about is we're all totally connected here. We realize we've got explosive growth coming to Utah County, and we're doing everything we can to use our power to vote as a block to get projects here. We do not want to look like Eagle Mountain. We want to get ahead of that, and so our focus is on making sure Utah County is well cared for, and we think ahead, and we're not too late to need. Thanks.
Do you know what? I'm going to say something about Eagle Mountain now that you said that, Francis. I've never felt bound by party politics. I don't review scorecards. I never have, and I never will. I look at emails. I look at what comes from the district. The only voting card that I review, and I've told this to Rick, and I mean it. He sends me a long, lengthy review on how it impacts Nebo. I think that's important because he's a constituent. I'm optimistic. I think the next 10 years are going to be our best. And I serve on some really fun committees. I'm going to tell you the most exciting assignment for the four of us, I thought, or the five of us, was when Doug got the chair of transportation. We have explosive growth, and we need to do something about it. I never want to end up like Eagle Mountain and Saratoga and Lehigh. Let me tell you some projects that we are collectively working on. We are fighting to improve the interchange in Santaquin. We've already got the funding to do the interchange in Payson. Doug has a funding request to improve Benjamin Exit. He's working with Salem City, Spanish Fork City. We're working to improve Center Street. North of Spanish Fork, we're working on that interchange, and we're trying to realign the railroad up Highway 6. Eagle Mountain is awesome, and Stephanie Grecius and I, at some point, we are going to meet in the middle. And our Utah County Caucus on Tuesday when we talk, I am going to start talking about a bypass in Utah County. If the freeway goes down in Springville, it goes down in Provo, how do I get from Santaquin to Salt Lake? And we need a bypass, and we need to do it now. It is a lot easier to buy sagebrush than alfalfa, and it's a lot easier to buy alfalfa than houses, and it needs to happen now, and I think we're all aligned. We need to think big. The coolest bill of the session right now is the spaceport. I'm on the Olympic committee. We will have air taxi in the Olympics. I want you to think that through. Our landscape is going to change. We need to be ready for it, and I think it's an exciting time for our state.
Thank you. The answer is no. It hasn't been and won't be. My responsibility as a representative is to represent our area, the district, House District 63, and I know I need to be accountable to all of you. My favorite part of all of this is getting your input. Before the session begins, I held 3 town halls. Actually, we all came together for a 4th town hall of getting your input and thoughts on recommendations. And after the legislative session is finished, I hold a town hall and invite everyone to come back and explain what happened and be accountable, that I know I need to be able to explain how I voted to be able to represent all of you. That's what I just love about this. We are so fortunate to live in our community and in specifically the area of the state that we do. Looking across this room, we have parents and grandparents, we have teachers, we have healthcare professionals, we have law enforcement, our sheriff is here, we have businesses and nonprofits. Look at all of us coming together on a Saturday morning to be involved. My perspective is that elected officials, politicians, are not in charge of our state. It's we, the people, that are in charge. So thank you for your involvement. Thank you for showing up. As building upon what has been said, you can participate in any aspect of this legislative session. The workhorse of the legislature are these committees. All the bills go through these committees. You can participate in any committee. You can go to the Capitol, be in person, or you can join through Zoom from your car, if you're pulled over on the side of the street, or your home or your office. When it opens up for public comment, raise your hand virtually online or in person, and you can share why this is a good idea or why this is a bad idea. I have seen where that happens and it changes the whole bill, and it makes things much, much better. In fact, I see a resident right here that was testifying before Law Enforcement Criminal Justice a couple of days ago about a very important bill about fentanyl. So thank you for coming and for being involved. This is what it's all about, and it's a privilege to be able to serve with you and to be involved with you and invite you to be involved. Send me your emails, text me. I'm getting about 500 on average every day, and I try to respond to every one of them shortly. And so I appreciate your patience with that, but your voice is so important, and it's a privilege to be able to represent you. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. I love serving my district. I thoroughly enjoy being with my community and the residents of the communities that I represent. We live in the greatest part of the country, in the greatest part of the state, and I just really enjoy what I do. And so I appreciate all of you coming here. As far as the question goes, I think one of the things that's important, I've never been asked for, if you vote for this, I'll vote for that. I've never been asked for that, not even once. It is important that legislators learn how to compartmentalize. A legislator who can't do that, so if somebody opposes, Representative Thurston's voted against my bills before, and then we have to go on to the next bill. And so every bill has to be taken on its face if we're doing the duty of the people. If I get into a conflict with another legislator and I'm not going to vote for good legislation because I'm mad, then we're not doing our job. I haven't seen that. And that's one of the things that I've learned, though, is that you do have to compartmentalize and make sure each bill stands on its own. I think Representative Thurston talked about it. There is some pressure if you allow it to be there. I have never felt like I had to vote a certain way. I think our leadership, there are certain bills that they care about, and they'll let you know in a roundabout way. But if you tell them where you're at, they're good to support you and let you be where you're at. My number one goal is the first person I represent are my constituents. That's who I represent first and foremost. Second of all, I have to be able to look in the mirror. Third is the party. But first and foremost, I represent my constituents. They happen to generally be part of the main party, so they don't always conflict a whole lot. But that's who I was elected to represent are you, the people who voted for me. Last thing, I'm excited to be on transportation. I think we've got a lot of good things going. We've got a lot of a good work to do. One of the reasons why I left my city council job that I loved is to come up here is because I saw the growth that was coming, and we needed better partnership with the state to make sure that we could facilitate that in a constructive manner so we're not in a bad place when it comes to that. So anyway, thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate all of you, and look forward to talking to you.